welcome back to Books and Tea with Sarah. I'm yours truly, and today I'm drinking Mother's Little Helper by David C. while I give you all my thoughts on Crown of Midnight, the second Throne of Glass book by Sarah J. Maas. As per usual, I will start off with a summary and my non-spoiler thoughts, and then I will move on to my spoiler-filled thoughts on the book. So let's get started. Now, since I haven't done a discussion on the first book of the series, I'd like to start off with a short introduction to that book. Throne of Glass is about an 18-ish-year-old girl, Selena, who grew up being the most notorious assassin in the country of Adarlan. During her career, which takes place before the first book, she was betrayed, captured, and then sent to a labor camp, where she was expected to die very quickly. 1 year later, the Crown Prince seeks her out in order to free her so that she can compete to become the King's Champion, which is his personal assassin. And so begins our story, which centers on said competition. I really enjoyed the first book, so if you haven't read it, you should stop watching this video, go read it, and then you can read the second book, and then come back to this video and we can discuss everything. Now I'm going to move on to a summary of the second book, so consider yourself warned for spoilers. So Selena is now the King's Champion, and she must do the King's dirty work in order to save herself as well as her friends. But when the king orders her to kill Archer, who is a courtesan that she grew up with while she was training for Arobin, because of his involvement in a plot to overthrow the king's secret plans, Selena has to know if Archer is really involved and what the king's plans are. As for the writing in this book, I thought it was pretty good for the most part, and it kept me well enveloped in the story. However, I did notice a few inconsistencies that kind of bothered me. One of which is kind of a spoiler, so I'll talk about that later. But the other one that really stuck out to me was when a renowned singer comes to the court to sing, and the song that she chooses to sing is about magic, which is illegal to talk about. Selena looks at the king during the performance to see what his reaction is to the song's contents, and when his face is blank or expressionless, she assumes that means that the singer's voice has softened the tyrant's heart, or that there's an unstoppable magic in music. I felt like this was a bit out of character for Selena, because there's no way that she is so naive to believe that, and so that really bothered me. Moving on to the characters, I didn't feel like anyone really underwent any change in this book, which isn't something that you kind of want to see while you're reading, but I still enjoyed Selena's and Kael's characters. Dorian drove me insane though, because pretty much every time he was mentioned, he was jealous or trying to get over Selena and pretty much acting like a 12-year-old. I liked him in the first book so much that I couldn't choose sides in the love triangle, but still in this book, he just annoyed me to no end. As for Nehemia, I felt like we didn't really see enough of her in this book. It was unfortunate because I kind of lost that connection to her that I had from the first book. I did really appreciate the side characters in this book though. I felt like there was a lot more focus on the king and what he's doing, and I really liked seeing someone from Selena's past. I also liked having that shady or gray area character like Roland, but I still felt like we kind of lost his plot line somewhere in the middle of the book, and he was kind of just forgotten about. As for the plot, I really like that these books are kind of episodic. You have an overarching plot for the series, and then each book has its own individual plot that is resolved by the end, except for the few connections that it still has to the overarching plot. I liked where this book went and that there was more development to the magic system, but the big twist at the end was super predictable. I also want to point out one more thing about the plot for some people who might be hesitant to read the book based on others' complaints about it. I feel like the primary complaint about this series is that Selena is an assassin, but she doesn't kill anyone. And I think the not killing people thing is very well addressed in this book. The reason that she doesn't kill anyone is because the people that the king sends her to kill are people who are against the king. And so she's going to save those people who can possibly help overthrow him. In addition, she had a really heartfelt conversation with Kael towards the beginning of the book about how killing people takes away a piece of her every single time, and she remembers all those faces, and it's not really a feeling that she particularly enjoys. Overall, despite the things that bothered me about this book, I still really enjoyed this book and look forward to seeing how the series continues. I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars. Now I'm going to move on to my spoiler thoughts. So if you've already read the book or don't mind being spoiled, stick around. If you haven't read the book and don't want to be spoiled, then stop watching, go read the book, and then you can come back and finish the video so that we can discuss your thoughts. So the first thing I want to touch on is one of the inconsistencies I was talking about earlier. So Selena ends up being poisoned by Gloriella. which is, as we are told, a poison that will temporarily paralyze her. However, despite the fact that it's supposed to temporarily paralyze her, they make a huge deal about getting all of the healers and making sure that all of the poison is removed from her system. In addition, fainting and paralysis are treated as if they're one and the same, which they are not. Part of the point of paralysis is the fact that you're still conscious. And I actually read a very interesting Stephen King short story about this, where this guy was paralyzed, but people thought he was actually dead, so he was conscious while people were starting to perform the autopsy on him. So it did bother me a little bit. I will say that in The Assassin's Blade, which I have read between finishing this book and making this review, they do talk more about how too much Gloriella can kill someone. But it's never mentioned in the first 2 books. I went back to Throne of Glass to look at it, so it kind of bothers me that they don't talk about it. They just assume that you know. So it was kind of inconsistent in my opinion. Next, I think what bothered me the most about this book was Dorian's character. At the end of the last book, Selena essentially breaks up with him, even though they didn't really have a relationship to begin with. And as much as I liked him, I was kind of happy about that because I liked Chaol a little bit better. But in this book, Dorian is insufferable. I mean, he has the jealousy of a 15-year-old boy, and he's supposed to be the future of this country. I get that moving on from Selena won't be an easy thing for him, despite the fact that they didn't have a real relationship to begin with. And he even simply decides that he'll just take a deep breath, close his eyes. Once he opens them, then he'll just let her go. And when he said that, I was just like, are you kidding me? That's not how it works. But still, you would think that with Chaol being his best friend of several years, that he would try a little harder to contain his own jealousy and move on. Next, the big reveal also made me a little nuts. I figured it out when Dorian was talking about Aelin, what she looked like, how she behaved, and all of that. And this was about halfway through the book. So for half of the book, I knew what was going to happen as the big cliffhanger at the end of the book, which kind of made the second half of the book a little obsolete for me and unenjoyable. I appreciate it when authors give clues to their big twist, so that when you actually find out, you can go back and see how it makes sense. But I felt like Maas made it a little too easy. In addition, it kind of contradicted Celaena's conversation with Archer about the rebels having Aelin on their side. In this conversation, I felt like it was strongly implied that Aelin was a different person. I actually went back and reread this conversation several times after I realized what was going on, and it still didn't make sense with Aelin and Celaena being one and the same. The next thing I want to talk about is Chaol's betrayal of Celaena, which I felt like was kind of a thin plot. First of all, he was doing his job and obeying the orders that the king gave him. Orders which the king knew he would obey, and so he purposefully gave those orders. And I know that obeying orders is a new concept for Celaena. She doesn't understand it. But I feel like she should be a bit more sympathetic towards people who are afraid to rebel against the king, especially those who work closely with the king, especially since she's afraid herself because she doesn't think they can actually overthrow him. I mean, she talks constantly about how it's useless to fight back, especially with Nehemia, and Nehemia gets mad at her for it. Second of all, even if Celaena had known about the assassination attempt or threat, nothing would have turned out differently. She still would have gone to save Chaol, and she wouldn't have been able to get back in time to protect Nehemia. And you can say, oh, well, her guards would have been on higher alert. Well, it's her guard's sole duty to guard her life, so they should have been on high alert anyway. The assassination threat shouldn't have made a difference in how well they guard Nehemia. Honestly, I felt like it was just a trash plot in order to create a wedge in the love triangle, and I think it could have all been carried out without being Chaol's fault in order to still drive Celaena to being revolutionary. Finally, I'm getting a little tired of Celaena's lack of trust. We get it. A shitty person raised you, and so you don't trust anyone, but it's still human nature to trust someone, especially someone that you're having sex with. And yet, she still hasn't told Chaol that the king said he would kill him if she ran away, and so obviously Chaol sends her away to escape, and that's just one of the many other things that she isn't willing to share with people. And you could argue that it's out of protection, but I don't really think so. I think it's out of distrust, especially because she's doing the exact same thing that she got pissed at Chaol for doing. So I really don't think you can say it's out of protection. Now, this isn't to say that there weren't things that I enjoyed, like Chaol and Celaena getting together. I loved the birthday dinner scene, and I really liked the whole plot with Archer, especially the fact that he was on Nehemia's side, but he disagreed with her about how they should approach the situation, and he actually wanted to approach it more in a way that the king actually would. But I do find it easier to discuss things that I didn't enjoy, just because if I only talked about the things I liked, I really wouldn't be discussing. I would just say that I liked it. Whereas here, I can tell you why I didn't like it, what I think would make it better. So that concludes my thoughts on Crown of Midnight by Sarah J. Maas. Let me know if you've read the book and what your thoughts are down in the comments below. I'm curious about how many people guessed the twist before it was revealed and how long before it was revealed that you actually figured it out. Thanks for watching, and subscribe if you want to see more bookish content from me. Until next time, I'll talk to you all in the comments. Bye!